I've been following Venezuela. Just 40 years ago, it was the second richest country in South America after Argentina. And both countries have been imploded by political elites who didn't want big, rich middle classes and large underclasses becoming middle class because they didn't want competition. With the old saying, as rich as an Argentine or as Argentinian.
The Pentagon war planners have rightfully said that 90% of modern warfare is informational. That's why it's more important than ever that all of you watching subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at Real Alex Jones, because InfoWars is the front line of the fight. And without your help and support, we will fail. With your support and with your prayers, we will be victorious against the globalists together.
There are more than 200 large islands in the Pacific Ocean, but very few of them are as prosperous as the state of Hawaii. And that's because there's Western culture and Western ideas here. When you look to the East for stability and free market ideals, you only find one other place that has those same values, and that's Japan. It has the highest gross domestic product in the world per capita for its population. It has the longest life expectancy of any group in the world. And they're incredibly honorable, focused, intelligent, dedicated, free market individuals. But we look at Soviet Russia, we look at communist China, we look at communist and socialist Venezuela, we look at Cuba. And we see nightmare scourges. We see countries going from doing pretty good to within a few decades being in nightmare degradation. It's a fact. I've been following Venezuela. Just 40 years ago, it was the second richest country in South America after Argentina. And both countries have been imploded by political elites who didn't want big, rich middle classes and large underclasses becoming middle class because they didn't want competition. With the old saying, as rich as an Argentine or as Argentinian. Same thing with Venezuela. Venezuela, some years, up until the 60s, had higher per capita incomes than people in the U.S. But the people said, you don't have to work anymore. Communism and socialism's here. It's a wonder system. It's wunderbar. And let's pull down the rich people that have houses on the hills. Let's get rid of their swimming pools. Let's everything free. It starts with school lunches. Then the state has your kids, and it produces a nightmare scenario. Now, after Hugo Chavez died, the country already had big problems. But it's been proven communism will only work with a cult of personality for a little while. It has descended into madness where the children pray every morning for their school lunch, first to Jesus, then to their parents, no food's given. But then when they pray to Chavez, who's dead, when he was living, they did this. Then they're given some cereal and milk. They've nationalized everything. They put their communist cronies in charge of everything. And it has descended into hell. 3 years ago, all of the zoo animals had been eaten. Before that, all of the domestic pets had disappeared. Now the pigeons have all disappeared. This is Venezuela, rich in oil, rich in soil, rich in agriculture, rich in culture. It was as rich per capita as the United States 50 years ago. All gone. It's culture. And it isn't that Latin Americans didn't have a free market culture. It isn't like they didn't want success. It wasn't like they were stupid either. They had corrupt elites that got control. The West, until 500 years ago, was just as corrupt and backward as any African country or any Latin American country. But the Christian ethos combining with new free market ideas dominated, took over and created competition, and you see modern civilization has come from that. The idea of better things, the idea of striving, the idea of organizing things around common activities and common choices, voting with our dollars, voting with our actions. And I saw videos today of them assassinating one of the political opposition leaders in Venezuela, shooting him during the election today and yesterday. It's been ongoing for 2 days. But a bomb goes off as the motorcade comes by of the communist dictator, and then people cheer as it blows up the police. Notice our communist Soros types want to kill police who've done nothing because they want to overthrow our government, overthrow our system. But there, it's people trying to overthrow the communism. And whereas I don't like seeing random people being blown up, you see folks bombing Nazis, you see folks bombing communists, you understand the desperateness they're going through, that they don't even have toilet paper in Cuba, unless it's in some fancy hotel the Westerners come to in Venezuela, in North Korea. Because the elites, just like Ceausescu in Romania, want to keep the people down. It turned out Ceausescu, for his 30-year reign in Eastern Europe, had plenty of power, but he wanted his government center in the middle of the city to have the power after 6 o'clock when the lights went off, so that only they would see the light of him up there and feel like he was invincible. What a delusional crazy. And then I run to people that say, F you don't want us to have our free Obamacare, everything's going to be free soon. When it's the big rich elites that are offshore and corporate executives that are exempt from taxes and have diplomatic immunity, they're the ones pushing this scenario. Because they're tax exempt. They want you to get rid of the middle class, steal all the money, transfer it to them, not because they want that money, but because they want to get rid of the ladder up for you into success. This is what it's really all about. Ultra rich using communist and fascist models to consolidate control. It's crony capitalism. And now that's understood, and that's why their system's in trouble. They want prosperity for them, but not prosperity for you. And that's really the big issue. What is it about America, for all its problems, that made the world want to be like it and come there? And why do the globalists want to hijack it and use it for their control to dominate the planet? Using our goodwill as a shield, as a disguise, as camouflage for the agenda that they were going to launch. It's amazing. How can anybody who I walk up to on the street say, Alex, they'll walk up and they'll say, you know, how dare you not want me to have free health care? It's free in England, it's free in Canada, it's free in Cuba. F you, fascist. And I go, everybody I know comes here from Canada and the UK and Cuba to get health care. Ours isn't perfect. It's become corrupted because corporations have gotten in control of government and made us buy their product through Obamacare. But, I mean, don't you understand that the British healthcare is horrible? They don't listen. They really believe Venezuela's great. They really believe Cuba's great. They really believe China's wonderful. See, if we would just collapse, then it could all be realized. But it's the West that gets in the way of the dream of communism and the Foxconn suicide nets and forced abortions. It's because they're liberal at Apple, running Foxconn and the slave stuff. So it's okay because they're liberal. Like George Soros is a Nazi collaborator and gets ADL awards. Well, my God, he's Jewish and a Nazi collaborator, so of course he gets awards from the ADL. And then calls everybody else a Nazi who isn't. That's just how it works in this upside-down, bizarro world. It's really just a bunch of really wicked, hateful people that feed on the fact that you're asleep and unaware to rule over you, and I just want the con game to stop. Communism and socialism works wonderfully. It works for the tyrants that run it, enslaving humanity and turning us into a cash crop, and who enjoy dominating and controlling people instead of enjoying turning humanity loose. You see that moon? Our technology is so advanced now compared to what it was just 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that having colonies on the moon, exploiting its resources, moving to the stars is an easier step than the last 6,000 years of our trials and tribulations and the trials and tribulations that came before that. We stand at the precipice, at the edge of the next level of human development, but it's up to you to decide if you want to take control of your destiny in your hands and demand that birthright, or if you want the selfish globalists to control you and your family. As for me and mine, we are moving forward into the future because we believe humanity is beautiful and wonderful and touched by God with a divine mission. If you feel as I feel and see as I see and have researched as I've researched, understand that we're brothers in arms, we're sisters in arms, we're humans in arms. No matter what color you are, where you came from, you bleed red blood and you want freedom and you believe in your children, then we're together. If you stand against that, you're of the devil. That's an archetype, and it exists Infowars.com is where the revolution against tyranny starts. You are where it ends and transcends.
Let's talk about Venezuela as Alex signs off from Hawaii. He will be back tomorrow. You may even hear from him live sometime point today, and we will hear more from him in the show. But Venezuela braces for a day of fresh violence in the wake of Maduro power grab victory. So there's some interesting angles to this. He claims he had a victory in this election. The government is claiming they had a huge turnout. You're hearing different stories from the protesters on the streets. You're seeing different, the polls that they're taking are indicating different voter turnout. So who really knows what's going on with that? What we do know is going on is that communism has failed Venezuela miserably. That is obvious. And you have to ask yourself a couple questions here. You have to ask yourself, well, one, why isn't the world news stage covering this as much? And I'm glad you have that Nikki Haley tweet up. We'll cover that in a second. But you don't really see too much on the news. You see the reports, you see the B-roll, and it's just, this is happening in Venezuela. Yeah, civil war is breaking out in Venezuela. Communism has failed. Why isn't anyone interjecting? Why isn't the UN interjecting? 10 protesters were killed. Where are all of these international front groups for humanity? Where are they? And then Nikki Haley tweets out, who's the U.S. ambassador to the UN, by the way. She's such a great ambassador. She told Syria that we're going to blame anything that happens in Syria on your leader Assad and then start war with you. She tweets, Maduro's sham election is another step towards dictatorship. We won't accept an illegal government. The Venezuelan people and the democracy will prevail. Okay, so why aren't we interjecting? We go into the Middle East, we go into Afghanistan, we go into everywhere in the Middle East, and we raid there. We've bombed 18 countries, I think, in the last 20 years, probably illegally, but nothing for the people in Venezuela, nothing about the civil war there that Nikki Haley even says is a result from an illegal government. And now, thanks to communism, Venezuela has fallen apart, and a civil war is going down. Meanwhile, in Brazil, you have Operation Car Wash going on. What we need to be doing here, like draining the swamp, we need to make it a legal matter. And that's why this story, House Judiciary asked for new special counsel for Clinton, Comey, and Lynch is so big. Yeah, and Susan Rice and Brennan and Clapper and McCain, all those crooks. Pelosi, they're all crooks. We need to drain that swamp. We'll be right back. This is the Alex Jones Show. Owen Schroyer filling in.
In ancient times, man roamed the earth in a constant state of hunting or being hunted. Introducing Caveman, where cutting-edge science meets ancient super nutrients. Secure your bottle right now at InfoWarsStore.com.